The operating room smelled of metal and iodine and something older that never washed away. Dr. Calder-Rowan stood at the table with his shoulders square and his hands steady, the way they had been for 3 decades, the way the residents had learned to trust, as if trust were a transferable skill. He had opened chests and closed them again. He had felt the pulse of a heart with his own fingers and known when to wait and when to move. He had built his life around the idea that there was always one next motion, and that motion was his. Mara Ive stood 3 steps back, the blue of her gloves too new, her mask too tight. She was the rookie nurse, still saying sorry when she reached for instruments, still memorizing the language of the room. Her hands were capable. Her mind was careful. She watched Dr. Rowan the way people watch weather, reading small signs, the angle of his wrist, the calm line of his back. The patient's chest was open. The monitors sang their thin songs. Outside the glass, time was ordinary. Inside, time was something else. Dr. Rowan's hand paused. It was not dramatic. No cry, no stumble. Just a fraction of a second where his fingers hovered above the heart, where his breath did not complete itself. In that space, Mara felt the room tilt, not because anything moved, but because everything that should have moved did not. "Doctor," someone said softly. Or maybe they didn't. Sound thinned. Dr. Rowan tried to continue. His hand trembled, once, like a leaf refusing to fall. His eyes, sharp as ever, did not blink. There was a look Mara had never seen on him before. Not fear exactly. More like the absence of the map he always carried inside himself. He froze. In that moment, a memory rose in Mara like a bruise pressed by accident. Her first week, the first time she had scrubbed in, the way her hands had shaken under the sink, water running too hot, too cold. She had thought of her mother then, hands arthritic and small, sewing late into the night, stopping sometimes to stare into nothing. That stare had meant pain. Or waiting. Or both. The anesthesiologist said something urgent now. The numbers on the monitor edged into wrongness. The heart pulsed, vulnerable and real, and the room's patience ran out. Dr. Rowan's breath hitched. He did not move. Mara stepped forward without deciding to. It was not bravery. It was recognition. She had seen stillness like this before, had learned that it could be dangerous to wait for it to pass on its own. She heard her own voice, steady in a way that surprised her. "Clamp," she said. No one looked at her at first. The room had been trained to listen to one voice, and this was not it. Dr. Rowan's eyes flicked toward her, just slightly, and in them she saw apology. Or gratitude. Or permission. The clamp was in her hand. She did not remember asking for it. Her fingers knew the weight. She placed it where it needed to be, gentle and sure. The heart responded the way hearts sometimes do when someone treats them like something alive instead of a problem to solve. "Retractor," she said, and this time the instrument came. Her mind narrowed. The room fell away. There was only tissue and rhythm and the knowledge she had built quietly, without applause. She remembered late nights studying until words lost meaning, practicing knots on fruit, the shame of mistakes, the relief of competence arriving without announcement. Dr. Rowan stood beside her, motionless, watching. His chest felt tight, then looser, then tight again. He had not expected this, the sudden blank where certainty lived. He thought of the first surgery he had led, the way his mentor's hand had hovered near his, not touching, ready. He had never imagined being on this side of that space. Mara worked. She spoke only when necessary. The room adjusted, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. The heart steadied. The numbers softened. Somewhere, a breath was released. When it was over, when the last suture lay neat and closed, Mara stepped back. Her knees shook then, finally. Dr. Rowan removed his gloves slowly, as if speed might break something fragile. He looked at her. There were no speeches. No praise. Just a nod that carried weight like a held hand. Later, alone in the locker room, Dr. Rowan sat with his head in his hands. The room smelled of soap and old fabric. He thought of all the times he had believed himself indispensable, and of the quiet relief that came with learning he was not. Mara washed her hands until the water ran cold. She stared at her reflection, the red marks on her face, the eyes that looked older than yesterday. That night, after the halls dimmed and the machines settled into their nocturnal hum, Dr. Rowan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea he did not drink. His hands rested flat on the wood, palms down. He thought of the faces he had taught, the ones who had moved on, the way teaching was an act of faith disguised as authority. He realized how close he had come to failing the one person on the table. Mara rode the bus home, her forehead against the glass, city lights sliding past like brief stars. She replayed the moment of stepping forward, the sound of her own voice, the way the room had answered. When she reached her apartment, she stood in the doorway and did not turn on the light, letting the dark hold her. Morning returned to the hospital without ceremony. The same revolving doors. The same coffee burned too long. Dr. Calder Rowan walked its corridors slower now, not because his body demanded it, but because his mind did. Every step felt like he was trespassing in a place that had once belonged to him entirely. The operating board listed cases under his name. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Inc. had not noticed what happened yesterday. Schedules were loyal to habit, not truth. He paused outside the locker room and listened to the distant cadence of carts, shoes, life continuing. His hands hovered near the door, remembering how they had hovered above a heart. The memory was sharp, humiliating in its gentleness. He had not collapsed. He had not faltered loudly. He had simply been absent at the wrong moment. Inside, he changed without hurry. Each movement felt newly deliberate. He flexed his fingers, watched them obey, then doubted them for doing so. Control had always been his language. Silence had answered him yesterday, and he did not yet know how to translate it. Mara Ives arrived early. She always did, as if punctuality might protect her from error. She tied her hair back, the mirror reflecting a version of herself she did not recognize. Someone capable. Someone who had not waited. In the break room, she poured coffee and let it sit untouched. Her hands trembled faintly, not with fear, but with aftermath. The body remembering what the mind had outrun. No one spoke to her about yesterday. Praise would have felt like noise. Avoidance felt like a question mark left hanging in the air. She checked supplies, ran through routines, let repetition smooth the edges of memory. Still, images returned uninvited. The open chest. The pause. The look in Dr. Rowan's eyes. Not authority. Something older. Something human. Their paths crossed near the nurse's station. It was almost accidental. Almost avoidable. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he replied, and there was a weight in the words, as if he were testing them for cracks. They stood there, the space between them filled with everything they were not saying. Finally, he spoke again, quieter. "I reviewed the chart," he said. "The patient is stable." She nodded. "That's good." A pause. He looked as if he might say more. Then a pager went off, rescuing them both. Later, in an operating room that was not his, Dr. Rowan observed. He stood back, arms folded, watching a younger surgeon lead with confident gestures. He noticed things he had once missed. Small hesitations. Overconfidence masked as speed. The way experience sometimes dulls curiosity. He wondered how many moments he had frozen like yesterday without anyone noticing. How many times others had compensated for him silently. The thought pressed on his chest with unfamiliar insistence. Mara assisted in a different room, her movements efficient, unremarkable. That, she realized, was a kind of victory. No one watched her closely today. No one needed her to step forward. Still, she carried the knowledge that she could. At lunch, she sat alone, picking at food. Across the room, Dr. Rowan did the same. Their isolation mirrored without intention. He felt an urge to speak to her, to explain, to apologize, to thank. Each impulse felt inadequate. Words had always come easily to him in lectures, in instructions. Here, they failed. He remembered his father's hands, calloused and steady, failing suddenly at the end. The way illness had stripped competence first, then dignity. He had sworn never to be that kind of man. The one who needed saving. In the afternoon, administration called him in. Concern wore a careful smile. Protocols were mentioned. Evaluations. Time off. He listened, nodded, agreed to what was necessary. Inside, something loosened. Perhaps relief. Perhaps grief. When he left the office, Mara was waiting outside, not for him specifically, just there, sorting charts. He stopped. "I wanted you to know," he said, voice low. "What you did yesterday mattered." She met his eyes. "I was doing my job." "Yes," he said. "And you did it well." That was all. It was enough. She felt heat rise behind her eyes and looked down before it could betray her. He walked away, lighter and heavier all at once. That evening, Dr. Rowan went home earlier than usual. His apartment greeted him with its familiar quiet. He sat on the edge of the bed and removed his watch, placing it carefully on the nightstand. Time, for once, was something he could choose to set aside. Mara stayed late, finishing tasks, avoiding the moment when adrenaline fully drained. When she finally stepped outside, dusk had softened the city. She breathed deeply, letting the cool air settle her. They both carried the day differently. He with the ache of relinquished certainty. She with the burden of discovered strength. Neither knew yet what it would cost them. In separate rooms, miles apart, they lay awake, listening to their own breathing, aware of the thin line between steadiness and stillness, knowing now how easily one could become the other. Mara learned that competence had an echo. It followed her down hallways, into rooms where no one said her name. People watched her hands a fraction longer. They asked her opinion and waited for the answer. She did not grow taller inside it. She grew heavier. On her days off she slept badly, waking with the sensation that something needed her attention and she had missed it. She replayed the surgery not as triumph but as responsibility. What if she had been wrong? What if certainty had been luck, wearing a convincing face? She began double-checking everything, then triple, until doubt crowded out rest. Dr. Rowan watched from a distance he had chosen. He took the mandatory time away from the operating room without protest. Observation felt safer than leadership. He sat in lectures meant for younger surgeons and listened as if hearing a language he once spoke fluently but now translated. His notes filled with questions instead of directives. At home, his hands learned new habits. Cooking slowly. Folding laundry with care. He noticed how often he dropped things. How his grip sometimes faltered when he did not look directly at it. The body, honest at last, confessed small betrayals. He did not hate it for that. He was tired of pretending otherwise. Mara's mother called one night. Her voice carried the thin cheer of someone who knew pain too well to announce it. They talked about nothing. Weather. Groceries. The neighbor's dog. When the call ended, Mara sat on the floor and let herself cry without understanding exactly why. Strength, she was learning, did not cancel fear. It lived beside it and demanded space. Back at the hospital, a complication arose in a case she assisted. Not catastrophic. Just enough to summon a tightness behind the eyes. The surgeon hesitated. For a moment, the room felt like it had before. Stillness pressed in. Mara felt the old instinct surge. Step forward. Speak. She waited. The surgeon found the way through. Relief washed the room. Mara's chest loosened. She wondered if she had failed by not acting, or succeeded by trusting. The line between the two felt thinner now. Later, she found Dr. Rowan in the library, a place she had not known he used. He sat alone, surrounded by old volumes, their spines worn by hands long gone. He looked up as she entered, surprised, then pleased. "Do you miss it?" she asked before she could stop herself. He considered. I miss who I was when I thought I could control it. She nodded. I'm afraid of becoming that. That fear, he said, is a good teacher. If you listen. They sat in silence. Pages turned somewhere. Time did its quiet work. An evaluation came back. Dr. Rowan was cleared to return to surgery with conditions. Reduced hours. Another set of eyes. He accepted without bargaining. The first case back was small. Routine. He scrubbed in with care that bordered on reverence. Mara assisted. Their movements aligned without effort. He spoke less. She anticipated more. The operation flowed not because of command but cooperation. When it ended, he felt a warmth in his chest that was not pride. Something gentler. Gratitude without ownership. Afterward, alone in the locker room, he leaned against the cold metal and closed his eyes. The room spun briefly, then settled. He breathed through it. He was not frozen. He was not unbreakable. He was here. Weeks passed. The hospital adjusted around new truths. Mara was offered opportunities that would once have terrified her. She accepted some. Declined others. She learned the power of no. Dr. Rowan learned the relief of it. One evening, late, an emergency came in. Severe. Time-sensitive. Dr. Rowan was nearby. So was Mara. The room filled fast. The familiar tension sharpened. Halfway through, Dr. Rowan felt it again. Not the freeze. Something adjacent. A narrowing. He recognized it now. He stepped back before it could claim him. Mara, he said simply. She took the lead without ceremony. The room followed. The heart steadied. Life continued. When it was over, they stood together, scrubbed and quiet. No one spoke. They did not need to. That night, Dr. Rowan wrote a letter he did not know who to send. He folded it and placed it in a drawer. Mara walked home under a sky stripped of stars by city light. She felt older. Not hardened. Just aware. In different beds, they lay awake. He thought of endings that were not failures. She thought of beginnings that were not victories. Both understood now that saving someone did not mean you were saved, only that you had been present when it mattered, and that presence, once known, would be asked for again. The letter stayed in the drawer through winter, through days when the hospital windows fogged and cleared and fogged again. Dr. Calder Rowan forgot it existed until the morning he did not. He woke before dawn, heart racing without reason, the room unfamiliar in its stillness. He opened the drawer as if called. The paper had yellowed slightly. He did not unfold it. He did not need to. It said what all unsent letters say. I was afraid. I am still afraid. Thank you for standing where I could not. He dressed slowly and walked to the hospital without music, letting the city's quiet speak. His reflection in shop windows startled him sometimes. Not older. Just altered. The man who had believed mastery was permanence had learned that it was only attention, renewed every day. Mara Ives finished her training rotation sooner than expected. Paperwork arrived with congratulations written in neat administrative language. She read it twice, then set it aside. Achievement felt less like arrival now and more like an open field without signs. She did not tell her mother right away. She wanted the news to feel real before it became shared. Her hands had changed. Not steadier. More honest. They shook when they should. They rested when they could. She no longer apologized for taking space. She still apologized for nothing when she was tired. The emergency came on a Sunday. Fewer staff. Thinner margins. A patient with a heart that refused to behave, anatomy complicated by years and chance. Dr. Rowan was there. Mara was not supposed to be. She had stayed late to help someone else, a habit she had not yet broken. The room filled. The familiar choreography began. Dr. Rowan took the lead, voice calm, precise. He felt the narrowing again but kept moving, adjusting, letting others mirror him. Then something slipped. A vessel tore. Blood answered gravity. Time thickened. He felt the old edge of stillness approach. Not sudden. Seductive. The promise of stopping to think forever. He saw, with piercing clarity, the cost of yielding. He also saw Mara, already stepping closer, eyes focused, breath even. "I'm here," she said, not to him, but to the room. He nodded. It was not surrender. It was choice. They worked together, overlapping, hands passing instruments without words. The tear closed. The heart slowed. The monitors softened their song. When it ended, when the chest was sealed and the room exhaled, Dr. Rowan realized his hands were steady again. Not because they always would be. Because he had not been alone. After, the hallway outside the operating room was empty. Machines hummed. Somewhere, a cart rattled and stopped. He leaned against the wall. Mara stood beside him, shoulder brushing his sleeve. "You stepped back before it took you," she said quietly. "So did you," he replied. They shared a look that held months of learning compressed into seconds. No hierarchy. No debt. Just recognition. Administration would later call it a success. Charts would record numbers. Neither of them lingered over those words. Success was a blunt instrument. What mattered lived elsewhere. Weeks later, Dr. Rowan taught his final lecture of the year. He spoke about anatomy, about precision, about the necessity of humility. He told a story without names. He watched the faces in front of him absorb it, saw some bristle, some soften. He did not need them all to understand. Afterward, he packed his bag and left the building before dusk. He did not feel unfinished. He felt intact in a new way. Mara moved into a smaller apartment closer to the hospital. Fewer things. More light. On her first night there, she cooked dinner and burned it slightly. She laughed out loud, alone. The sound surprised her. It stayed. Her mother visited once, sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug. She listened more than she spoke. When she left, she hugged Mara longer than usual. Neither mentioned fear. They did not need to. On his last day before a planned sabbatical, Dr. Rowan returned to the locker room and opened the drawer at home one final time. He took out the letter and carried it with him to the river. He did not read it. He let the water have it, watched the paper darken and dissolve. Some truths did not need preservation. The hospital went on. It always would. New emergencies. New hands. New moments where stillness tempted and movement answered. Late one evening, months later, Mara stood alone in an operating room, finishing paperwork after a long case. The lights hummed softly. She rested her hands on the table where so much had happened. She closed her eyes and breathed. Not in prayer. In acknowledgement. Elsewhere, Dr. Rowan sat on a bench overlooking water, the city distant behind him. His hands rested open on his knees. He felt the cold air, the ache in his joints, the quiet satisfaction of having stayed when it mattered and stepped aside when it was time. Neither thought of themselves as heroes. They thought of themselves as present. That, they had learned, was the only saving that ever truly lasted.